Hard power, referring to military capabilities of countries. Soft power, referring to cultural influence of countries. Think of Hollywood, for instance, of America and the influence it has on global culture, and how the United States is seen as a supposed global policeman or force for good, if not the center of the universe. But there's a third category of power that we have to keep in mind: sharp power. Yes, sharp power. This, in particular, refers to how authoritarian superpowers like Russia or China weaponize democratic freedoms to push for their own national agenda, sometimes at the expense of the host country. Think of disinformation campaigns, malign influence, propaganda, paid trolls, or reinforcing deepfakes or chipfakes. Over the past decade, China has become an increasingly influential force on the world, economically, militarily, but now also in terms of sharp power. From Australia to Taiwan, there have been many cases of malign influence operations by China. And ahead of 2022 elections, for instance, the Facebook flagged a number of China based units, cyber units, who were allegedly involved in boosting a Duterte campaign for the presidency and the vice presidency, namely Sara running for the presidency and the father running for the vice presidency. More recently, authorities in the Philippines and beyond have also been able to track China based elements boosting or reinforcing, if not instigating, deepfakes and cheapfakes against President Marcos Jr. in light of his more critical stance towards China in the West Philippine Sea. What is propaganda? How does China engage in propaganda and disinformation? And what is the implication for the Philippines? More importantly, how can the Philippines resist and stand up to China? In order to understand that, we have a special guest who served in the inner sanctum of China's propaganda machine. David, thank you so much again for
Thank you very
joining
much,
us.
Richard.
Obviously, there's a lot to discuss, but can we a little bit go to the origin stories, right? Because you're not the first very high caliber Filipino journalist who worked for quite some time at the most influential networks in China. Former Ambassador Chito, a good friend of ours, the current ambassador Jaime. These were the legendary Filipino journalists in China. So it looks like there's a kind of a lineage of superstar Filipino journalists playing very important role in the development of Chinese, essentially, media network over the past
Well, I think
decades.
when it came to those three, it was like I think a twist of fate. Remember, this is a generation earlier when they were activists and ended up in China at that time. I was still in grade school, but for them, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because they got stuck in China, and then they ended up working in labor camps, and they ended up studying in China, learning the language, the culture, and everything, that they ended up so desirable. Because in those days, very few foreigners were living in China. That's a fact. And so the three of them ended up as experts on China. And so here come the American networks grabbing them right away because China was emerging at that time. And the networks at that time had a lot of money for foreign correspondence. Not like now. Now that they've scaled back. But back in the day, news organizations had a huge budget for foreign correspondence. Huge, yeah. And they were lucky. That's why they were lucky.
And how did your path take you to China?
Well, my path to China really was more of...
Because theirs was like martial law and Cold War, right?
Right.
Yours is a different, completely
Well,
different
I've been
generation.
to different countries. I've worked in different countries. I've worked for international news organizations already several times in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and I've also worked in the US and Canada, okay? But I always felt fascinated because I wanted to get to know China a lot more.
Right.
In fact, earlier in my career, I'd already been an anchor for the old CCTV International.
Interesting.
But not very long, like about half a year only, Just gave me a taste of what life was like in China.
Is this in that elephant-shaped building thing?
This is the old one. This is
Oh,
the
no, not
military
that one.
museum. No,
Oh, because I've been to
yeah,
that.
the
Yeah.
military museum.
Oh,
The
the old. Oh,
original. That's right,
wow.
military museum.
OG, yeah.
That's right.
This is what, 2000s?
This was early 2000s. That's
2000s,
right,
yes,
early
yes,
2000s.
2000s, yeah.
But this time, they a private, semi-independent TV network had opened up in Beijing. And it was reportedly run and owned by forces opposed to Xi Jinping.
Interesting.
These are the moderates. The
Interesting.
moderates in the Politburo, in the party, all right?
When you say moderates, which
This is the group of Hu
factions?
Jintao,
Hu Jintao, exactly. Okay.
Jiang
Right,
Zemin,
right, right.
Jiang
right.
Zemin, all right? And this network was reportedly owned by Jiang Zemin.
But Jiang Zemin is the Shanghai clique, and wasn't Xi Jinping supposed to have been sponsored by these people? I know this is a little bit internal politics.
But he's the nationalist group. He's the hardliners, the
Right.
nationalist group. All right. And I had friends foreigners working for this new network. It is called Blue Ocean Network.
Yes, I heard about
All right,
that.
Blue Ocean.
Yes,
and
yes.
became very popular
I heard about that.
because they were more liberal. They were allowed to broadcast certain things which CGTN and
kind of like Kaixin to a certain degree. Wasn't Kaixin
a
also?
little bit like
Yeah,
Kaixin,
exactly.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was invited by my friends, come on over. We've told them about you. So okay, so I joined. That's how it started. My return to China, and it was good for a while. Then they started clamping down again. The government started when we became too risque. They
Yeah.
started clamping down on us. Luckily, one of the Chinese staff of that network moved to Global Times, and she liked my work when we were together at BON. Then one day she called me. She said, "I'm now with Global Times. Would you like to work for Global Times because they're looking for an excellent news editor? And I know you, David. I know you're very good, and I've recommended you to Global Times."
Isn't that quite a crossover?
Yeah,
This is like
I know.
the Blue Liberals
I
and
know.
Global Times. Is
But
like,
to me, I saw that as an opportunity
interesting.
to really get up close. How do these guys think?
Right.
So in other words, I ended up a Trojan horse.
And they didn't have issue that you're a Filipino or
No. In fact, I tell you, Richard, when I first joined even BON, many of the foreigners and even at Global Times, they all thought I was an American. Nobody thought I was a Filipino.
because you're Nye, right? Yeah, yeah.
Nye, and when I start talking,
Yeah.
obviously, in fact, the American editor at Global Times, when I first joined it, day one, the first question he asked me was, "So David, what state are you
Yeah,
from?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, what state are
Marikina
you
State.
from?" And I started smiling. I said, "Does the state of the Philippines
Yeah,
count?" He said, "No, S.
Former colony.
You're from the Philippines?
Yeah.
I know a lot of Filipinos. They don't sound like you." They said, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You started talking, I
Yeah.
mean, so I used that to my advantage.
Right.
The fact that many people thought I was an American. And that gave me an advantage because, let's face it, many countries abroad and many foreigners, they don't have a very high regard for Filipinos. Mainly because, I think it's partly our fault, because we are with that OFW thing. So that's the impression of foreigners. Filipinos, ergo OFW.
The Hong Kong especially. And
Yeah, but they're also growing in the mainland. Their numbers are growing. In the
I didn't
mainland.
know that.
Yeah, they are. Not as fast as Hong Kong, but there's a bigger group. But what I'm saying, there's a stigma. There's a stigma. All right?
What I meant was not stigma in a social sense. What it meant is stigma in a political sense that Philippines is a U.S. ally, a rival. No, but these days it was
Well, they
not
used
a
to
big
ask a lot of questions. They used to ask me a lot of
Mm,
questions.
Right, right.
In fact, when I joined Global Times, Noy Noy was the president.
right? That's what I'm saying.
I joined 2012.
Yeah.
In 2012, Noy Noy was the president. Then Duterte became president in 2016. So there was a shift, right?
Right.
And I noticed also they were a lot nicer to me when Duterte took over.
Absolutely. I sense that
And they-
too.
and I just kept on listening. And because I was up close dealing with them, with the communist cadres, with the assigned communist officials to Global Times, all I did was I listened. In a way, I acted dumb
right.
so that they would open up to me, that's what I did. I became basically a Trojan horse.
Fly on
So
the wall.
better than a fly on the wall. Fly on the wall with a tape
Yeah,
recorder.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, I internalized all this, and I saw how they would make decisions, how they would create propaganda. Being a newspaper, that's the irony of it all, because it's all propaganda, all okay. And they would change information. You edit the first draft. When the second draft comes to you, some parts of the story have already changed. So they suit it to their needs.
Right.
So it's clearly propaganda.
Let's talk about it. Okay, I think that sets the predicate. First of all, how high did you go in the
I was a
global?
news editor for the front page
Mm,
and for the op-ed page. That's about as high as you get.
that's the two most important sections, right?
And in fact, I felt flattered because they liked my editing so much that they didn't want the Aussie, the American, the Canadian, other editors to touch those pages. That's David.
Signature is there.
He
right?
has to
Yeah.
edit those pages there. So that gave me the advantage because these are the critical pages. These are the pages, obviously, which create news.
Sets the tone.
So I know how they think.
Yeah.
And I kept pounding at it. I kept remembering how they would change stories, what kinds of stories they would put out for the front page, what kinds of opinions they would make on their op-ed page. And being a journalist for many decades, it was easy for me to internalize all these things.
The algorithm, essentially.
Right. And I remember how they would act also. Even society, I would observe how they would act, how they would think, even the staff.
Yeah.
How they would act, how they would, and I know how they act.
The nuances.
I know how they
yeah,
act.
Yeah.
I know how they act. I mean, I hate to use the term, but they're the closest thing to AI people. I mean, I hate to use that term because it sounds almost condescending. But my impression is, you press a button, they will act in a certain way.
But maybe
It's
that's
almost
a reflection.
it's almost metaphorical,
Yeah, but David, to be fair, I think that's unfortunately what comes with living in a totalitarian state.
Right,
almost.
because
Yeah.
and their education system, Filipinos don't know this,
Yeah.
is based on rote memory. Rote memory from the start, from
Yeah.
the get-go. Meaning, they only know what they are told
No,
to memorize.
Yeah.
That's it. So they act in a certain way, collectively,
yeah.
with slight
variations and
slight,
digressions.
very
yeah.
slight. Maybe depending on family background, maybe depending on academic credentials,
or
attainment,
privilege.
maybe how much they've traveled. That changes a little bit. Then they try to ape how the foreigners act like, and it really looks funny when they get back to China. They try to ape how foreigners talk or act like. I tell you, it's a roll eye moment for me.
It's a stand-up.
It's a major roll eye moment for me.
Right. Let's talk about the Global Times.
Right.
What is the Global Times? Why is it called the Global Times? What is the history of
The
that?
Global Times began in 2009. It's the tabloid subsidiary of the People's Daily. People's Daily is run by the propaganda department of the Communist Party.
This is the mother of all newspapers
That's right.
in China. Yeah.
People's Daily. All right. But the Global Times ended up more popular because it is hard-hitting. It's a nationalist arm.
Yeah.
Very hard-hitting. And you can almost tell that Global Times reflects better how the inner sanctum of the party thinks.
So this is
Especially
almost the opposite of what people say, right? People say
Especially
they're
Xi
just a
Jinping.
loud
He's
guys.
nationalist. No.
Interesting.
He's nationalist.
Interesting.
And therefore, if you know Xi Jinping's attitude, you will know that the Global Times kind of like gives you the clue on how they think. All right? What do they discuss behind closed doors? You know right away. You have an inkling.
So they're not a caricature to you. They're the Jungian shadow that really reflects their deep
When I
thinking.
was there, Xi Jinping, I don't know, Hu Xijin was the
Right.
editor-in-chief.
He was just removed.
He was a
recently.
loudmouth,
Yeah,
He
he's
was
on
very
Twitter.
popular.
Yeah.
He was very notorious.
Yeah.
Hu Xijin, yeah.
Yeah.
I know him quite well. Obviously, I'm front page. He talks to me a lot. So I know how he thinks. I know how they think.
Is he charming in person?
He tries to act charming. He
Yeah.
tries. Because he's been exposed. He was a
Right.
Russia, Soviet Union correspondent in the Soviet Union before. He was a journalist. I mean, by Chinese standards. I mean, he was a
Right.
journalist, okay? But what I mean, he was exposed. He was a foreign correspondent. So he has some exposure, obviously. So he acts a little more sophisticated than other people, all right? So I internalized all this, and I saw how they thought. And I kept plugging at it, you know. I was a mental picture of how they act like, how they think. And it grew more and more. And I thought to myself, this is a huge advantage. I mean, how many people get this opportunity to be up close, have a front row seat to how the Chinese communist cadres think and how they do things?
Can we deconstruct that? So how do they think in terms of their place in the world, in terms of their relationship with neighboring countries, and particularly
This
with
is
the
one thing
Philippines?
Filipinos should understand, okay? For a long time, China was prosperous, right? That is this economic miracle, right? For decades. Okay. It began with Deng Xiaoping, the openness.
Market opening, yeah.
Openness, right? Openness on everything, education, culture, yada, yada, right? Okay. You notice when things were good in China, China was very peaceful. Or they were very nice, cooperation, things like that, right? When things turn sour, when the economy turns sour, especially the economy, then they get more defensive. They get more aggressive externally. Why? It's to divert attention from the local domestic audience to show that they are powerful, things like that. Because they don't want to show their domestic audience that they are weak. So they use diversionary tactics by being aggressive externally. All right? Case in point, the Philippines, for example. You know, China's economy right now is in the doldrums. The exports are down.
Real estate sector in problem.
Urban youth unemployment, the future of China, youth unemployment, urban, is up. The last time they reported a figure was 21% of urban youth unemployed. Then they stopped reporting that figure.
Too embarrassing, yeah.
Why? Because China only values primarily two things.
Stability and growth.
No. Material wealth and saving face. That's it. Everything else is secondary. Understand that. So the reason why they're aggressive is to save face to a domestic audience. That's our concern. Why? Because the communist rulers want to continue to legitimize their rule over China. And so they're afraid if there's social unrest because of a poor economy, we might see Tiananmen Square redux. And they don't want that.
And also the rallying around the flag aspect to this, right?
They throw this nationalist fervor out there all the time. Look of us are so powerful, yada yada. You know, we can do this to other countries. You know, nobody can stop us. We're invincible. Look what we're doing to Taiwan. We can just surround them and they can't do anything. You know, but if you go to the Taiwan issue, for example, is Taiwan afraid of China? No, because Taiwan knows that China is afraid to start a military conflict. This is all for show. This is all a show to the domestic audience.
Performative.
It's all performative. This is all for show. This is all chest pumping. Okay? China is afraid to get into a military conflict. And people in the Philippines should know that, including the government. If you stand toe-to-toe with them, they will back off. One-on-one. So what do? If you stand one-on-one with them, they'll back off to save face, and then they'll go around you and do the mob rule, what they're doing to the Philippines right now. We stand pat, they stop for a while, now they come back, mob rule. Look at the flotilla surrounding several shoals and reefs,
the
right?
militias, yeah.
Right. Mob rule. But in order for them to stop that, I've always cited the case of Indonesia.
In Natuna?
Because Indonesia knows how to stop China from its shenanigans, bullying shenanigans. Under President Widodo. He got so fed up with all these illegal fishing vessels in their territorial waters, what did he do? One day he rounded up all these vessels and on live national television blew them up. And what did China do? Nothing, because they lost face. Huge face. So what did China do to save face as a concession? China was forced to give a concession because they lost face. They built Indonesia's first high-speed railway from Bandung to Jakarta.
Which took a long time, and there was a lot of zig and zag there on that point.
And do you see China bothering Indonesia now? No. Lately, Indonesia again got pissed off with China because they kept on dumping cheap goods, right? What did Indonesia? They slapped a 200% tariff on Chinese goods. And yet, China is Indonesia's top trading partner. But not afraid, see? You must be resolute in dealing with China. You must push them back because they hate to lose face if you do that. Because they're forced to make concessions to save face.
But just to explain, because the way saving face is understood is actually don't embarrass them.
So you have to embarrass them. You have to embarrass them because they will force, if you do that, they are forced to make concessions. That means you can stand up to them. They feel bad if a tiny country can stand up to them. And the reason why, despite their military might, they haven't attacked Taiwan is because they are scared that Taiwan is standing up to them, that they might lose face in a military conflict.
So it's the fear of like an embarrassing.
That's right.
Like what happened with Vietnam with them in 1979.
That's right. They backed off right away.
Right. Because I was just trying to say, like, but saving face is about getting your way,
and
right?
Richard, look at what they've been doing to us. They're not using any military force. They're using water cannons.
Yeah.
They're bumping our ships, strafing. They're using flares. Nothing. So my recommendation is stand up to them. They are trespassing into our territorial water. They see a rubber boat from China approaching our boat, shoot them. They hate using military force. We should start using deadly force. Push them back. They will run away. They're afraid to get into a military conflict. I guarantee you.
I mean, the last time they got pretty embarrassed by the Vietnamese. I mean,
you shoot their rubber boats, they will run faster than Speedy Gonzales. Okay, I guarantee you. Okay, they will lose so much face. Why? Because they will look so humiliating in the eyes of the world. Imagine the Philippines is kicking their ass. Whoa, right? China hates that, okay? But no, China plays the long game. For so long as we show ambivalence and weakness, they will continue to bully us. We have to be consistent, firm, and if necessary, we have to use deadly force, Richard, okay? Lately, we've been acquiring a lot of new military hardware. It's nice for a show of force. Guess what? There are times you just got to use them. Show and tell is one thing. Using them is another. And at the rate things are going, the way China is bullying us, we got to use some of that stuff. All right? The way they've been strafing us. What if we strafed them one time? We've got our fighter planes. Let's strafe. What are they going to do? They're not going to get into a military conflict. They're not going to do anything, Richard. I guarantee they're going to lose face.
But what about the importance
and our ships,
of us?
Let's ram into their ships.
But what about the importance of us showing we're a responsible country and we don't?
No, you have to understand this, Richard. The whole idea that if we don't do anything, things are going to de-escalate is wrong. That's the opposite. China will be emboldened to continue to escalate what they're doing, okay? To de-escalate, you have to show force against them. Then they will stop. As I said, what Widodo did, they stopped. There's your de-escalation. They stopped once and for all, right? Because she showed immediate force. They used the proverbial you-know-what on China, okay?
Right. Now, the thing is, the whole idea of don't pick a fight with China because it's suicidal and
I'm not saying, no. That's where you're wrong. As I said, let's go back to the premise, Richard. China hates a military conflict. They are avoiding a military conflict by all means.
Yeah, I understand.
But they know Philippines is also cowardly. They know Filipinos. That's why they keep on nudging us.
They think we're timid and diffident.
Absolutely. So they keep on doing it. Filipinos have to learn that gain gaining something many times requires sacrifice. It requires a risk.
But
The greatest
calibrated risk.
Richard, you know your history, I'm sure. The greatest countries in the world underwent huge upheavals, violent revolts, civil wars, and they lost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Then you have a paradigm shift in their country, which leads to a realization, and so they became great. The greatest countries in the world. That's the common thread. You name them. Russia, China, the US,
Yeah.
France, Germany, the list goes on and on. We, people power, scratch head.
I'm all for the, I'm all ears to the whole crucible argument. All the some would say, if you look at Scandinavia, they never had as. But my point was actually this, if you allowed me to.
Right.
The way it works is that the pro-China elements in the Philippines use this, oh, let's not pick a fight with China. It's a
Because
suicidal
China has
narrative.
driven a wedge already. China's weapon, I told you earlier, the two things most important to them is material wealth and saving face.
Yeah.
They are using money, material wealth, that's the only method they know to drive a wedge, to buy off the Filipinos, because they know many Filipinos are materialistic. And they know Filipinos are easy to buy.
Or that we're
And it's called
poor
bribery
country.
by whatever means. It's not necessarily directly bribe, although some, I'm sure, are engaged in that. But it's bribery by whatever means, business deals, whatever. And only a few benefit. But a few who are influential and who are...
Elite cooptation.
That's right, and moneyed. And they're the ones who benefit, not the Philippines.
What is your understanding of the disinformation campaign by China? Because, we talk to
China has a
experts.
huge budget for disinformation. But the problem with China is this. They are using disinformation based on lies. And their Filipino surrogates are using the same lies, and it's so easy to poke holes in their argument. If only we can counter that with propaganda, but based on facts. But we must be resolute and hard-hitting about it.
Isn't that an oxymoron, propaganda?
I know, but propaganda in the sense that it has to be pounded in
National interest, yeah.
that pounded in people's head. Now, if I may add, and I need to say this part, okay? Decades ago, there was a person, most people, millennials and Gen Zers probably don't know, a guy named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he marched on Washington and gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. It was a time in America where there was huge social divisions because of racial discrimination, okay, and because of other issues, the civil rights movement, all right, August 1963. In that speech, he gave a famous line to try to galvanize Americans to unite, all right, to unite and to fight this discrimination and to support the civil rights movement. I believe that the Philippines is in that moment right now because of what China is doing, and they are escalating what they're doing. And what is that line? The Philippines right now is in the fierce urgency of now moment. That's the line, the fierce urgency of now moment. Meaning, it is time to unite Filipinos. It is time to stop fighting each other and pulling each other down and being such crabs. We have an adversary out there who is slowly, piece by piece, encroaching on our territorial waters. My fear is this, Richard. If we don't move fast and resolutely, one day, Richard, we're going to wake up and we're not going to be able to control our territorial waters. In other words, there will come a time, because of the Filipinos who have co-opted with China, all right, and they are rich and powerful, that we will have to beg China to sell us marine products within our own territorial waters, because China effectively controls our territorial waters. Can you imagine begging to buy tuna in our territorial waters from China?
I think we're getting some tilapias already that may have come from
What
West
I'm
Philippines
saying is
insult to us.
it's
yeah.
going to reach a very dangerous level where, for all intents and purposes, we are going to be a Chinese lackey country. Remember, China has no allies, if you notice. That's why China is so angry and so fearful of the US and Japan, because they're allied. What China has are people who have transactions with them. In other words, China is all about a transactional relationship. They have lackeys, they have vassals. And if you know your history, in the 14th century, that's what China adopted. So in other words, China regurgitates its history.
Tributary system.
The tributary system, that's right. And that's what they're doing right now, because now they have the strength again. They are repeating what they did in the 14th century, only for modern times. And you notice that China only does that when they are powerful. And because China's system is the education system, is the rote memory system, they have templates of information they store, and they regurgitate their templates. And so all they're doing is they're pulling out the template on tributary system and doing it in a modern system. That's all they're doing.
21st century.
So if you understand China, everything, they're not complicated. It's very easy to understand China. Just see what they've been doing in the past. Chances are they're going to spin the wheel and do it again and only change it for modern time. That's it. They're not complicated. They're not mysterious. They're very easy to read. And that's my advantage living and working there for 10 years for the Global Times as a news editor. I really, I knew how they were thinking. And so for me right now, it's easy to predict. If they say things, if they do things, they're going to do this. I know right away. When they say something, I know the nuances in their language. One word I would like to stress, cooperation. Their ambassador recently said, last week, in a forum obviously organized by pro-China Filipinos called the Manila Forum for Philippine-China Relations at the Conrad Hotel, and that he's proposing a greater Manila Bay Area, similar to the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area.
Right, yeah.
Guess what? That's China's way of saying cooperation again, the word cooperation. And I know exactly what China means by cooperation. Cooperation is we're going to get 90%, you're going to have 10%. You're going to benefit 10%, we're 90%. China will never be 50-50 cooperation. We get 80, 90%, you get the crumbs. And guess who's going to get the crumbs? That's still worth a lot. Only those who co-opt with them, those they trust already, those who have been co-opting with them for a long time. China is very simple. They're like a coconut. Think about China like a coconut. Why? China, the shell is very hard. It's very hard to get into their good graces. But once you penetrate, it's very soft and hollow inside. Then they will trust you for life.
Good friends of China. They have this term, right? The good friends. Like
good friends, meaning those who have good transactions with them.
Right.
Transactional. Everything in China is money, is material wealth based. If they can gain out of you, you're our friend. Everything is transactional. Trust me, I know.
But David, some would say that because you were in the inner sanctum of the more hawkish side of China, perhaps that may have influenced, if not distorted, your view of China. Just
No.
You're saying this is the true reflection.
There are many good Chinese. I'm talking about the Communist Party. I'm not talking about the people. The people are generally very nice.
They are.
And it's very sad. It's very sad that they are caught in this
system. Yeah.
It's very sad. Okay, it's very sad because I have some good Chinese friends,
right,
and they are very good people.
They are, yeah.
And they always question what the Communist Party is doing, you know. But because they are so afraid, because it's a
totalitarian state. Yeah.
Everyone is monitored.
Yeah.
They have the most number of cameras in all the world. Okay, in public.
How did you get out of China? So, sorry, what were the circumstances of your exit?
Oh, I said I was appointed. Good night, goodbye.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to stay.
Because it was a plum
they
job.
They liked me.
Yeah,
they liked me a lot. They were going to raise my salary again. I said no. I got to.
Job, yeah.
I had to serve. It's time for me to serve the Philippines. I said. Okay. I think I've spent good years here. Thank you very much, but I have to serve the Philippines now. And that was time with Bongbong, right?
Right. Which they thought
then they
would
started
turn out.
asking me a lot of questions before I left.
Yeah.
How is Bongbong? How different is he from Duterte? I asked, and I was very diplomatic. I said, he's a very level-headed person.
Yeah.
But I said one thing, I'll tell you straight off, I told them. he is not going to be
Duterte.
a carbon copy of
Yeah,
Duterte. I
yeah,
guarantee. There
yeah,
are
yeah.
going to be changes, and get ready for them, I said.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I told them.
And you drew the line for them not to expect because you spent 10 years
I
there. You're
told them
going to be a
straight.
good friend of China.
I'm very,
Yeah.
I'm very blunt, Richard. If you
Yeah.
get to know me, I will tell you straight up.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
I am not going to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you straight up. Because everything I say, in other words, Richard, is I can back it up.
Right.
That's been the culture of my life. My life. All right? Because I was a debater for Ateneo. So as a debater, you are taught to prove everything you say. Oratory is different. You can make flowery words and sound nice. You don't necessarily have to prove anything in oratory. You just have to sound good. But in debate, no. If you want to win, you got to prove everything you say. And that's been my culture ever since. And I was also a chess player for Ateneo. Chess is always strategy.
Yeah.
See? So that's my background, see? That's my background. Of course, I was a stage actor also, and that helped a lot. That's the eloquent part. That's the style
Is there another
part.
profession we don't know about? I'm just kidding. It's like, go on. There's more going on.
There's a lot more to me.
I know.
I'm stopping right
off
there.
The record.
I'm stopping right there, Richard.
We'll discuss the rest after the record. But I want to go back to this issue. So how do we fight the Chinese disinformation in the Philippines within the framework of a pluralistic democracy?
We just have to continue to push back everything they say. We must have a response. I call it because I used to be also a PR strategist, by the way, for several companies. I call it a rapid response group. Really good at rapid response.
Right.
It's your, what they call crisis PR group.
Yeah, exactly.
They must be really good. Rapid response. Don't even wait a second. Move right away,
Don't give it time to
No more to percolate. No more. It's always rapid response, and we don't have that. We don't have that. And we always have conflicting statements. No, we got to be resolute. You have to push back. Look, obviously we have diplomatic relations with China. We have to maintain diplomatic relations. But, if they call us their friends, guess what? Here's a reality check. Real friends don't dominate friends. Real friends don't bully friends. It's just a reality check here. So people understand what a real friend is. So stop using the word friend if you're going to bully us. All right? You can't be a fair-weathered friend. You got to be a friend at all times. And real friends don't bully friends. Real friends don't dominate friends. Real friends don't cheat friends. Real friends don't take over other friends. All right? They draw the line. Okay, this is your line. This is your part. You own this. This is your piece of cake. I'm not gonna grab your piece of cake because we're friends, right? And there's a Filipino term for it, right? Hating kapatid, right? Okay, right? So let's be friends. But the moment you do that, don't expect us to let you do it. No. We're going to bite your hand. We have to start biting their hand. Okay? They're not going to get into military conflict, I guarantee you.
Is it also because of the U.S. element? Because we have a mutual defense treaty with the United
they're
States?
they're always wary of the U.S., obviously. But here's one thing. And let me explain this. The U.S. and its allies are not going to provide us more aid
unless we fight the fight.
Unless we fight the battle ourselves. Case in point, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Ukraine shows bravery. Here comes all the support from the U.S. and NATO. Right?
They're
so
not
much
gonna
so that
invest
they
in
can
a
even
loser.
infiltrate Russian land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kursk. Yeah.
It shows bravery. Okay, you're brave. Good. Here's your arms. We'll help you. They will support you if you do the dirty work.
For your own interest. I mean,
That's
it's not
right.
America. The reason I'm saying
No,
this
it's
is because
American interest
there's
also,
all of this
obviously.
proxy war nonsense. Oh, you're doing this for America.
No. U.S.
This is our own.
Ukraine is doing it for itself. Okay?
And we're doing this for ourselves too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not going to help the Philippines, if we don't fight it out.
Yeah.
I told you earlier, we have to understand that there is always an element of risk and sacrifice if you want a greater good. To achieve a greater good, you have to risk and sacrifice. There is always a risk in wanting a greater good. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Filipinos must, and they stop being greedy. Okay, always, oh, no, we don't want to get, no, just don't, as long as we're okay with our, lives, our wealth,
But David, to be
no,
fair,
bahala kayo dyan.
David, to be fair, if you look at the surveys, 93% of Filipinos support a tougher stance. So it looks like a
You
very
have
small.
to, you have to take a stand. You have to do something about it. You cannot always say, well, we agree with tougher stand, but just leave us alone in our happy, enjoying our wealth, and let us do whatever. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get engaged because it might affect my finances. No. That's enough. Just my support, verbal support, moral support. But leave my family alone. Let's just live a good life. No. I mean,
You have to have skin in the game.
you got to risk something. Believe me.
Skin in the game.
Believe me. I mean, I've seen enough. As a journalist all my life, you have to risk. As a journalist, I've risked a lot in my lifetime. I guarantee you.
Yeah. And I suppose you're
And
getting
I could have been a
backlash
lot.
now.
I could have been a lot wealthier if I co-opted with so many different people in my career. But I've chosen, out of conscience and my education and family background, to say no. That it's more important that principles over profit is my principle, is my policy. Okay? That's always been my policy. Principles, conscience over self-gain. Okay? It's tough. It's painful, Richard. I've gone through a lot of pain. I guarantee you. But
I'm sure working for how many years did you work for Global Times?
At 10.
10. How did you explain it to yourself? I mean, Global
I explained to
Times
myself,
is a
but
mouthpiece of China.
this is the information, the knowledge that I'm going to acquire for this
It's
is
gonna be
one day is going to be useful for the greater good.
And the
this,
base now.
so I'm very devout. I'm a Catholic. I'm very devoutly Catholic. I'm a Jesuit educated all my life. and I use that as my basis for my life. It's painful. People don't understand. It's painful being a real Catholic. It's not a walk through the park, believe me.
Right.
It's painful being a real Catholic. You have to sacrifice a lot.
Carry the cross, yeah.
Well, the crucifix would not be our symbol of Catholicism if it didn't mean something to what Catholics should do. Your leader sacrificed his life. What do you think we should do? Have a good life? Oh, be disengaged with everything? Oh, really, huh? Let's be happy? That's a term I always hear nowadays. It's so funny.
Are you getting backlash from your former colleagues? I mean, you came from the inner sanctum, as you
I
say.
don't care.
Now you're very open about this.
Are
you getting...
Conscience is more important. Conscience is more
Right.
important, Richard. Conscience is more important. As I said, you have to say, you have to do what you have to do. As I said, there are risks involved, but that's life. Okay. I'm first and foremost. St. Thomas More said it decades, centuries ago. I'm the king's good servant, but God's first. It's as simple as that, Richard. It's as simple as that. Okay. So understand where I'm coming from. Okay. Understand where I'm coming from, and I'm doing this for the greater good, not for my good, for the greater good. Okay. It sounds funny to people who love to talk about being happy and disengaged, but guess what? I've chosen that path, and I am at peace with that path. That's the best part. That's the best part. I'm not worried about 90 years on Earth. I'm worried about the next stage, not 90 years on Earth. See?
On that note of moral clarity, thank you very much, David, for this fantastic conversation. It turned out as more morally inspirational and kind of a clarion call for kind of a whole-of-nation approach, in addition to being very analytic and very introspective when it comes to your experience with China. Thank you again, David, for this fantastic conversation. Catch us again next week here on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. I'm Richard Hidarian, and that was The View from Manila. We're One News, all sides, all the time.